Why do you listen to me? I'm not a rabbi. I'm not Jewish. I'm just a college kid. Why then do you watch these videos? I've asked myself this question a lot, actually. I first obviously asked this question before I started the channel, and since then I've asked it many, many times. For if I were you, this whole time I thought, there's no way I would watch me. If I'm going to get information about the Noahide code, I'm going to go to a rabbi. And quite frankly, that's what I do. And so I've often debated abandoning this channel, largely for that reason. Again, I'm not Jewish. I'm not exactly called upon to be a light to the nations like the Jews are. I'm not fluent in Hebrew. I don't know all the sources. I haven't been properly educated. I don't even have a local rabbi who I ask my halakhic questions to. So I've often thought maybe I should just spend my time researching the prisons, punishment, psychology, so that I can impact the world in that way. And then I just leave the Noahide education to the rabbis. And so I actually came extremely close to shutting this channel down back in November. And I ended up basically putting my fate in Rabbi Michael Schulman's hands, the director of Vast Noah. I emailed him basically saying all these things. Would it be better for me to spend my effort trying to make the world more inhabitable in the legal prison domain and then just leave the religious education to the rabbis? And here is essentially what he responded. As long as you are presenting correct and appropriate information for non-Jews about the Noahide code, then you're accomplishing a very good purpose. Every Gentile who listens to your videos and becomes educated or inspired to bring his or her life into closer alignment with God's will, that is indeed contributing to making this world more inhabitable. And so that's basically what I needed to hear to continue. I had my most trusted rabbi's encouragement. By doing this channel, I would be making the world more inhabitable, and he encouraged me, and so I continued. Yet I still had this feeling in me that wasn't quite comfortable with it. And this has remained with me until I recently listened to Rabbi David Gottlieb's lecture on logic. For those of you who don't know, Rabbi Gottlieb is a former professor at Johns Hopkins University. He has a PhD in, I think, mathematical philosophy, and he became Orthodox later in his life. But in any case, in this particular lecture on logic, he asked the question, is it ever right to commit yourself in such a way that you know that you are believing something false? In other words, is it ever right to believe in something that you know is false? Now, obviously, all of us are like, no. Reasoning and logic is committed to the truth. Believing in something false is the opposite. But then he presented the preface paradox, and it goes essentially like this. Imagine an author who writes a long, carefully researched book. For each individual claim in the book, the author reasonably believes this statement is true. But in the preface, the author also writes something like, despite my best efforts, there are probably errors in this book. After all, I've made many claims, there's bound to be an error. Now, he believes each claim to be true, but then he also says that he believes that there is at least one error. Both of these thoughts are reasonable to have, and yet they're contradictory. That's the paradox. He believes every statement is true, and he also believes at least one is not true. And so this is a logical contradiction. He believes that there are no errors while also simultaneously believing that there's at least one error. So then what should we do? Should we read his book or should we reject his book? We know that the vast majority of his book is going to be true, but we also know that some of his book is going to be false. And so if we read his book, we would be committing ourselves to reading something and believing in something that is false, even though the vast majority is true. And so Rabbi Gottlieb says that we should not reject the entire book, even though we will be consuming errors and misinformation. Because the flip side is that we'll miss out on a lot of valuable information that is in this book. We should accept the book knowing that we'll gain a benefit of 95% of it being right, while also knowing that 5% of it will be wrong, for example. And so here's a case where it is rational to adopt a policy where you know that you'll be believing something that is false. And if this sounds crazy, we do it all the time. Think of the Encyclopedia Britannica, for example. Most of it is true and accurate, but it's also 20 volumes long. There's definitely mistakes in the Encyclopedia Britannica, but so then should we reject the entire thing? No, it has a gigantic amount of useful information. So in terms of knowledge and doing well in the world, we would be much better off accepting the Encyclopedia Britannica with its errors than just rejecting the entire thing. And so even though he didn't connect this to students teaching Judaism, for example, I made a connection and it has given me a lot of comfort. Finally. I've started to humbly imagine myself like the author of that preface paradox. I admit that I may not know everything, and I definitely don't know everything, but I am 100% committed to the truth. I am committed to presenting only the most accurate and well-researched information. I try my hardest to be constantly reading and listening to qualified, respected rabbis who have ideally received some form of modern-day simcha transmission from Moses to teacher that goes all the way back to Mount Sinai. And so my dilemma is that I believe everything that I'm telling you is true, but I also simultaneously believe that I'm gonna make errors, I have made errors, and I will make errors. In fact, over the past few months, I've realized that I have made errors. And in the video description, I list these, but I will be making videos that will revise these errors and correct them. But I think I finally understand why it is worth me making these videos. I have finally come to the point where if I were you, I would watch these videos, knowing that most of the information is going to be true, and maybe some of it's going to be false, but there's a lot of valuable information in that trueness, in that truth. So finally I can feel comfortable promoting this content. Before I kind of felt that really people really should just listen to the rabbis, nobody really should listen to me. And quite frankly, I still think that stands. The rabbis are the ones that you should be primarily listening to. They're spreading the light in the world. Their words take precedence over everything I say when it comes to Noahide. However, with this channel, I'm trying to go through all of the Noahide code, explain it all the why, not just the what. And so I feel like I'm offering something unique, but all of it, again, is just based off of the Bible, the oral tradition, and rabbinical opinions. So in short, no, I'm not a rabbi, and you shouldn't treat me like one. But because I strive to be careful, honest, and committed to the truth, I have found comfort that there is value in this channel, and that if I were you, I would consume this content, even though a minor portion of it will be false. And I say all this in sincere humility. Literally, my senior quote was Socrates, "I know nothing." But as I continue to learn Torah and seek God's will, I hope slowly to move a little closer to knowing something. And rest assured, now I see no end, at least until we cover the entire Noahide code. And I don't worry about view counts or subscribers, because I know that this is the legal system of the future. And even though people aren't watching now, they will be watching later. And it may not be my channel, but it will be some Noahide channel. This is the future, and hopefully in my day, we will see the entire world come to know the true God. Thank you guys for sticking with a college kid who has 0 credentials. Your trust is astounding. At this point, though, I don't think that you guys are crazy at all. In fact, I would join you. Thank you guys for sticking with me on this journey for truth.